Well, we have a new bill proposed for those who have been sitting and waiting for Paycheck Protection funding. However, I'm not sure that this bill actually does quite enough. We've been hammering, vying for support for those who are waiting for funds, struggling small business owners who, through no fault of their own, applied for the Paycheck Protection Program and it ran out of funding before they were given their share of the funding. And there's this weird thing going on, whereas there's a massive problem affecting literally millions of small business owners, the backbone of the United States, who employ 50% of the workers in the United States. There's a weird thing going on where this program has run out of funds and there's very little attention on this. If you look up on Google, there's hardly any articles regarding the Paycheck Protection Program running out of funding. Why have we not received a bill already on this? Why is there not 5 different proposals to try and get more funding for this program? I don't know the answer to that, but we do have a bill to look over. So let's talk about this bill. Let's do the math to see exactly how many businesses would be covered. And let's just talk about everything you need to know. So popping into the bill here, we don't have the actual bill text yet because it's not on the Senate website. This is on Jackie Rosen's website, who is sponsoring this bill. Now, I will say Jackie Rosen has been a huge supporter of small business in the past. She's been helping with the fight with EIDL. She helped to extend the Paycheck Protection Program through the end of May. She's been doing a lot of good things. And this is her bill. She's trying, but we'll cover the details. And I guess you can decide whether this is actually enough or not. So this says today, U.S. Senator Jackie Rosen, a member of the Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship, announced the introduction of her Keeping Our Promise to Small Business Act, legislation that would allow for all Paycheck Protection Program applications submitted on or before May 4th, when the PPP funding ran out, they would be eligible to receive the funding that they were promised through this program, which sounds all good and dandy, but then when you look at the nitty-gritty details here, it's not quite as simple as it sounds. So it does a few things. It would add more funding, but then it would also create a kind of targeted PPP. So first, it would provide Paycheck Protection Program funding to the general fund for all PPP applications that were submitted to the SBA on or before May 4th, 2021, when the PPP ran out of funding. Now, I kind of have an issue with how this is written because it's submitted to the SBA. So there's this weird duality here where if a PPP loan is submitted to the SBA approves it, meaning you have a loan number, you have a promissory note, things like that, those funds are considered allocated on the SBA's end, and they're pulled from the available funding. So if you have an SBA loan number, if you sign a promissory note, you should be good to go. You should receive funding. It can still take a while. It can still take 20 to 25 days for the lender to actually process it, and then the ACH payment to deposit into your bank account. It can take a while, but the funds should already be allocated. And then we have another group of people who applied. It's sitting at their lender, but you might not actually know if this has been submitted to the SBA or not, because how it works is your lender processes your application, and this can take a while. They do their front end checks, and then it's submitted to the SBA, who does their checks. Now, the SBA checks typically don't take quite as long unless there's some kind of error code or issue at the SBA. Now, if you ran into an error code with your application, chances are you would be covered by this criteria here, which is great. Your lender would be able to work through that error code, and you would eventually get funded. But there's a huge group of people who submitted their PPP loan potentially a week or 2 or 3 weeks before May 4th, but it wasn't actually submitted to the SBA. And those people would not be covered in this funding in the vague language that they're using. So if this were to go through, I think they would have to specify this a little bit better. And not to mention that this doesn't give a dollar amount either. And this is really an issue because it breaks loans into 2 sections. Those who are submitted to the SBA on or before May 4th, and those who weren't. So in the other group, it would provide an additional $5 billion in funding in PPP authorization to loans that weren't yet submitted to the SBA on or before May 4th, or they were applied for after May 4th until May 31st. $5 billion in funding for those businesses. And it's slightly targeted as well. So to fund approved applications of eligible small businesses with 100 or fewer employees, so smaller amount of employees, I don't think that would disqualify many people because, let's face it, most large businesses received funding long ago. In states with greater than 6% unemployment. So that's an interesting criteria in itself and a preference for women, minority, and veteran-owned small businesses. But on the unemployment aspect, when I was thinking about this, I thought, okay, it probably would still be most states because the average unemployment in the US is still over 6%. It's something like 6.2, 6.3%. But if we look at the unemployment rates for states, this is in April, which April was actually higher than March. If we look at this, it would only count about 20 states to be eligible for that $5 billion in funding. So most states, the majority would not be eligible. You can pause this, see if your state fits in that criteria or not, but by default, most people's state does not fit in that criteria. So it's pared down pretty dramatically. And then I want to talk about the $5 billion aspect. First, let's take a look at, this is the most recent data for the Paycheck Protection Program. We can see here the average loan size now is $44,000. It's gone down slightly over the last few weeks, and we can do some real basic math to see what exactly this covers. I'm sorry if my iPad dies while I'm doing this. We're living on the edge right now. It's at 1%. So first off, we have 2 to 3 million businesses that are unfunded. I've spoken to some lenders and they estimate that 2 to 3 million applications are sitting out there, not funded, not processed yet by the SBA. They don't have a loan number, anything like that. 2 to 3 million. And my iPad just died. Dang it. And that's what I get for living on the edge. So we have about $4 billion in CDI, CDFI funding left of that $8 billion that was, remaining a couple weeks back. But $4 billion is left. That would equate to 90,900 funded loans at an average loan size of $44,000 per loan. 90,000 additional businesses that would be funded. And then Rosen's plan would give an additional $5 billion in funding, which is 113,600 additional funded loans for a total additional loan amount of $204,500. So let's say we go with the 3 million figure here. 1 million of those loans are already attributed to the SBA. They were submitted to the SBA on or before May 4th. Those people would be good to go. They would be funded through Rosen's plan. That leaves 2 million more businesses who potentially applied a couple weeks before the 4th, or for whatever reason it wasn't submitted to the SBA yet because it takes time for the lender to process it and then submit it to the SBA. So it'd be 2 million businesses left with applications. That is about 10% of that 2 million would actually get funded. Even if we said one of the 2 million aren't actually eligible, they just apply, it's fraud, things like that, that's still only 20% of the businesses sitting, waiting in queue who wouldn't be funded through this program. So with this bill, I think it has good intentions. I think it's trying to help out the struggling small businesses. It's trying to, keep that promise, but it just doesn't quite do it to the amount that I think really any small business owner is hoping for, especially a small business owner who's struggling right now in a state like Nebraska that has very low unemployment right now. It's kind of the same issue as that low income census tract issue with the EIDL, where you could be struggling, but if you just live on the wrong street or your business is located on the wrong street, then you just aren't eligible for the $10,000 grant. It's going to create a lot of scenarios like that. So I think its intentions are there. I think it's better than nothing. It's the first bill that we have to work with. So we have to applaud it on that merit. But I think that we can do a little bit better as well. And this isn't to mention that this also doesn't include anything about the retroactive PPP, because we have to remember the people who are most on the ball here, the people who applied the earliest with the Paycheck Protection Program, the solo operators, the 1040 Schedule Cs, who applied early and had their PPP loan based on net income, still have had no opportunity to bump that up to gross income, which is just extremely unfortunate and pretty ridiculous that if you procrastinated a little bit, you got a better situation than those who were the most prompt. And this does nothing to address that issue. And of course, there would need to be even more funding allocated in order to do something like that. Doing the math on this, if let's say 2.5 million businesses are eligible for the PPP loan at an average loan size of $44,000, that's about $110 billion needed in funding to complete this program. If we do the retroactive PPP, it's probably something like an additional 15 to 20 billion on top of that. So 130 billion in total, which is a lot of money. But if we think about it in the grand scheme of this entire program, the entire program was nearly $1 trillion. So they missed the mark by about 10%. It seems to me that they would look at this and and just think, okay, we missed the mark by 10%. Let's just allocate an additional 10% in funding, help out the businesses in need who hit these criteria, and we can go on with our lives. So this is what we have to work with for now. On one hand, I'm happy that there's actually a bill. There's something to base discussions and negotiations on. And on the second hand, I think we can do better. I think we can do better for the struggling small business owners who applied for this program and through no fault of their own, funding ran out of this program. So let me know what your thoughts are on this bill. Should we just pass this? Is it better than nothing? Or should we hold out and should we get a little bit more? I would like to thank you for watching. I hope that we see some progress here, and I hope that you have a profitable day.